and which extends itself both to our impressions and ideas. The division is into simple and complex. Simple perceptions or impressions and ideas are such that admit of no distinction or separation. The complex are the contrary to these, and may be distinguished into two parts. Though a particular colour, taste, and smell are qualities all united together in this apple, 'tis easy to perceive they are not the same, but are at least distinguishable from each other. All our simple ideas in their first appearance are derived from simple impressions, which are correspondent to them, and which they exactly represent. A Treatise of Human Nature, Book 1. On Cause and Effect. Thus, not only our reason fails us in the discovery of the ultimate connection of causes and effects, but even after experience has informed us of their constant conjunction, it is impossible for us to satisfy ourselves by our reason why we should extend that experience beyond those particular instances which have fallen under our observation. We suppose, but we are never able to prove, that there must be a resemblance betwixt those objects of which we have had experience, and those which lie beyond the reach of our discovery. A Treatise of Human Nature, Book 1. The impossibility of a continued and distinct existence. We may well ask what causes induce us to believe in the existence of body, but 'tis vain to ask whether there be body or not. That is a point which we must take for granted in all our reasonings. We ought to examine apart these two questions, which are commonly confounded together, viz., why we attribute a continued existence to objects even when they are not present to the senses, and why we suppose them to have an existence distinct from the mind. Under this last head, I comprehend their situation as well as relations, their external position as well as the independence of their existence and operation. The senses give us no notion of continued existence, because they cannot operate beyond the extent in which they really operate. They as little produce the opinion of a distinct existence, because they neither can offer it to the mind as represented, nor as original. To offer it as represented, they must present both an object and an image. To make it appear as original, they must convey a falsehood, and this falsehood must lie in the relations and situation. In order to which they must be able to compare the object with ourselves, and even in that case they do not, nor is it possible they should, deceive us. We may therefore conclude with certainty that the opinion of a continued and a distinct existence never arises from the senses. A Treatise of Human Nature, Book 1. Whatever convincing arguments philosophers may fancy they can produce to establish the belief of objects independent of the mind, 'tis obvious these objects are known but to very few, and that 'tis not by them that children, peasants, and the greater part of mankind are induced to attribute objects to some impressions and deny them to others. Accordingly, we find that all the conclusions which the vulgar form on this head are directly contrary to those which are confirmed by philosophy. For philosophy informs us that everything which appears to the mind is nothing but a perception, and is interrupted and dependent on the mind, whereas the vulgar confound perceptions and objects, and attribute a distinct continued existence to the very things they feel or see. This sentiment, then, as it is entirely unreasonable, must proceed from some faculty other than the understanding, to which we may add that as long as we take our perceptions and objects to be the same, we can never infer the existence of the one from that of the other, nor form any argument from the relation of cause and effect, which is the only one that can assure us of matter of fact. Even after we distinguish our perceptions from our objects, it will appear presently that we are still incapable of reasoning from the existence of one to that of the other, so that upon the whole of reason neither does, nor is it possible it ever should, upon any supposition, give us an assurance of the continued and distinct existence of body. That opinion must be entirely owing to the imagination. A Treatise of Human Nature, Book 1. Errors in religion are dangerous, those in philosophy only ridiculous. A Treatise of Human Nature, Book 2. A reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions, and can never pretend to any other office than to serve and obey them. A Treatise of Human Nature, Book 2. What philosophical truths can be more advantageous to society than those here delivered, which represent virtue in all her genuine and most engaging charms, and makes us approach her with ease, familiarity, and affection? The dismal dress falls off, with which many divines and some philosophers have covered her, and nothing appears but gentleness, humanity, beneficence, affability, nay, even at proper intervals, play, frolic, and gaiety. She talks not of useless austerities and rigours, suffering and self-denial. She declares that her sole purpose is to make her votaries and all mankind, during every instant of their existence, if possible, cheerful and happy. Nor does she ever willingly part with any pleasure, but in hopes of ample compensation in some other period of their lives. The sole trouble which she demands is that of just calculation, and a steady preference of the greater happiness. And if any austere pretenders approach her, enemies of joy and pleasure, she either rejects them as hypocrites and deceivers, or if she admit them in her train, they are ranked, however, among the least favoured of her votaries. An inquiry concerning the principles of morals. I have often observed that, among the French, the first questions with regard to a stranger are, is he polite, has he wit? In our own country, the chief praise bestowed is always that of a good-natured, sensible fellow. An inquiry concerning the principles of morals. Were the disposal of human life so much reserved as the peculiar province of the Almighty that it were an encroachment on his life for men to dispose of their own lives, it would be equally criminal to act for the preservation of life as for its destruction. If I turn aside a stone which is falling upon my head, I disturb the course of nature, and I invade the peculiar province of the Almighty by lengthening out my life beyond the period which, by the general laws of matter and motion, he has assigned it. A hair, a fly, an insect is able to destroy this mighty being whose life is of such importance. Is it an absurdity to suppose that human prudence may lawfully dispose of what depends on such insignificant causes? It would be no crime in me to divert the Nile or Danube from its course, were I able to effect such purposes. Where then is the crime of turning a few ounces of blood from their natural channels? On suicide. The powers of men are no more superior to their wants, considered merely in this life, than those of foxes and hares are compared to their wants and to their period of existence. On the immortality of the soul. Our sensibility before the composition of the body seems to natural reason a proof of a like state after dissolution. On the immortality of the soul. In Newton, this island may boast of having produced the greatest and rarest genius that ever rose for the ornament and instruction of the species. Cautious in admitting no principles but such as were founded on experiment, but resolute to adopt every such principle, however new or unusual, from modesty, ignorant of his superiority above the rest of mankind, and thence less careful to accommodate his reasonings to common apprehensions, more anxious to merit than acquire fame. He was, from these causes, long unknown to the world, but his reputation at last broke out with a lustre which scarcely any writer during his own lifetime had ever before attained. Most of the celebrated writers of this age remain monuments of genius perverted by indecency and bad taste, and none more than Dryden, both by reason of the greatness of his talents and the gross abuse which he made of them. His plays, excepting a few scenes, are utterly disfigured by vice or folly, or both. His translations appear too much the offspring of haste and hunger. Even his fables are ill-chosen tales, conveyed in an incorrect though spirited versification. Yet, amid this great number of loose productions, the refuse of our language, there are found some small pieces, his Ode to St. Cecilia, the greater part of Absalom and Achitophel, and a few more, which discover so great genius, such richness of expression, such pomp and variety of numbers, that they leave us equally full of regret and indignation on account of the inferiority, or rather great absurdity, of his other writings. The History of England. Look round this universe. What an immense profusion of beings, animated and organized, sensible and active. You admire this prodigious variety and fecundity, but inspect a little more narrowly these living existences, the only beings worth regarding. How hostile and destructive to each other, how insufficient all of them for their own happiness, how contemptible or odious to the spectator. The whole represents nothing but the idea of a blind nature, impregnated by a great vivifying principle, and pouring forth from her lap, without discernment or parental care, her maimed and abortive children. Dialogues concerning Natural Religion. Chronology of significant philosophical dates. 6th century BC. The beginning of Western philosophy with Thales of Miletus. End of 6th century BC, death of Pythagoras. 399 BC, Socrates sentenced to death in Athens. Circa 387 BC, Plato founds the Academy in Athens, the first university. 335 BC, Aristotle founds the Lyceum in Athens, a rival school to the Academy. 324 AD, Emperor Constantine moves capital of Roman Empire to Byzantium. 400 AD, St. Augustine writes his Confessions, philosophy absorbed into Christian theology. 410 AD, sack of Rome by Visigoths heralds opening of Dark Ages. 529 AD, closure of Academy in Athens by Emperor Justinian marks end of Hellenic thought. Mid-13th century, Thomas Aquinas writes his commentaries on Aristotle, era of scholasticism. 1453, fall of Byzantium to Turks, end of Byzantine Empire. 1492, Columbus reaches America, Renaissance in Florence and revival of interest in Greek learning. 1543, Copernicus publishes On the Revolution of the Celestial Orbs, proving mathematically that the earth revolves around the sun. 1633, Galileo forced by Church to recant heliocentric theory of the universe. 1641, Descartes publishes his Meditations, the start of modern philosophy. 1677, death of Spinoza allows publication of his Ethics. 1687, Newton publishes Principia, introducing concept of gravity. 1689, Locke publishes Essay Concerning Human Understanding, start of empiricism. 1710, Berkeley publishes Principles of Human Knowledge, advancing empiricism to new extremes. 1716, death of Leibniz. 1739 to 1740, Hume publishes Treatise of Human Nature, taking empiricism to its logical limits. 1781, Kant, awakened from his dogmatic slumbers by Hume, publishes Critique of Pure Reason. Great era of German metaphysics begins. Hegel publishes The Phenomenology of Mind, high point of German metaphysics. 1818, Schopenhauer publishes The World as Will and Representation, introducing Indian philosophy into German metaphysics. 1889, Nietzsche, having declared God is dead, succumbs to madness in Turin. 1921, Wittgenstein publishes Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, claiming the final solution to the problems of philosophy. 1920s, Vienna Circle propounds logical positivism. 1927, Heidegger publishes Being and Time, heralding split between analytical and continental philosophy. 1943, Sartre publishes Being and Nothingness, advancing Heidegger's thought and instigating existentialism. 1953, posthumous publication of Wittgenstein's Philosophical Investigations, high era of linguistic analysis. Chronology of Hume's life. 1711, David Hume born in Edinburgh. 1723, enters Edinburgh University at age 12. 1729, suffers serious mental breakdown. 1734, retires to France to write his philosophical masterpiece. 1739 to 1740, publishes his Treatise of Human Nature, which attracts little attention. 1745 to 1746, acts as tutor to Mad Marquis of Annandale. 1746, Hume takes part in General St. Clair's farcical invasion of France. 1748, publishes first collection of his essays. 1754 to 1762, publishes successive volumes of History of England. 1758, publishes an Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding, essentially a rewrite of volumes 1 and 2 of the treatise. 1763, becomes secretary to British Embassy in Paris. 1766, brings Rousseau to England. 1769, returns to live in Edinburgh. 1776, dies after prolonged illness. This concludes the reading of Hume in 90 Minutes by Paul Strathern. Copyright 1999 by Paul Strathern. This book was read by Robert Whitfield. This unabridged recording was published by arrangement with Ivan R. D. Publisher and was produced in 2004 by Blackstone Audiobooks Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Neither this recording nor any portion of it may be reproduced or used for any purpose without prior written authorization from Blackstone Audiobooks. If you would like to obtain a complete catalogue of our titles or a monthly update telling you about new releases and our new collection of books on CD and MP3, write to Blackstone Audiobooks, P.O. Box 969, Ashland, Oregon, zip code 97520, or call 1-800-SAY-BOOK. That's 1-800-729-2665. You may also obtain the same information from our award-winning website. Our address, all one word, is www.blackstoneaudio.com. Thank you.